A long time ago, there lived a fisherman named Kofi. Kofi was a native of Nedu village, a small village along a wide river, famous for its abundant freshwater fish. Almost everyone in the village made a living from the river, but Kofi was different. No matter how hard he worked, he struggled to catch enough fish to support his family. To make matters worse, his boat was old and worn out. In fact, it had been patched so many times that it looked as though it was held together by a rope. The other fishermen would laugh whenever they saw Kofi returning from the river. "Look, it's Kofi. He has gone to catch the wind again," they would say. And to be honest, they weren't completely wrong. Most days, Kofi's nets came back almost empty. While other fishermen returned home with baskets full of fish, he often caught nothing but seaweed, broken shells, and dirt. There was a time he caught an old sandal that didn't even have its pair. Life was not easy for him. At home, his wife Abena never complained, even when there was very little food to eat. Some nights, all they had for dinner was boiled yam, yet she always welcomed him home with a smile. Kofi loved his wife dearly. Although they had little money, little food, and very little luck, they had each other. And whenever life became difficult, he would remind himself that having someone who loved and supported you was a kind of wealth that no amount of money could buy. Little did they know that their lives were about to change forever. One evening, Kofi stayed on the river long after the other fishermen had gone home. The sun had begun to set, and the day was already coming to an end. One by one, the fishermen pulled their boats onto the shore and headed back to their families. But Kofi remained. He told himself that fish were easier to catch at night, but that wasn't the truth. He had stayed behind because he was ashamed to return home with nothing after a long day's work, ashamed to hear the villagers laugh at him again, ashamed to face Abena knowing that there would be very little food for dinner. "Just one more try," he whispered. He paddled his boat into the river and cast his net into the water one last time. Then he spoke a few quiet words to the river, just as his father had taught him when he was a boy. After that, he waited. At first, nothing happened. Then suddenly, the net became heavy. Kofi's heart was filled with excitement. This must be the biggest catch of his life, he thought to himself. Quickly, he began pulling the net into the boat. He imagined his basket overflowing with fish. He imagined the surprised faces of the other fishermen, but when he finally pulled his net out, the excitement disappeared. There was only one fish, a small silver fish with scales glowing strangely. He stared at it in confusion. Then the fish spoke. "Fisherman," it said softly, "set me free, and I will give you a gift greater than any catch you have ever made." Kofi jumped so hard he nearly tipped out of his boat. A talking fish? His hands began to shake. Without thinking, he threw the fish back into the river. He thought he was imagining the whole thing. Moments later, the silver fish swam back to the side of his boat. It said to him, "Why are you afraid? I have not come to harm you. I have only come to ask, what is it that you want?" Kofi swallowed hard. What could a fish possibly give me? "Ask for whatever you desire, and I will grant it," the fish said. "But choose with care. The river is generous to those who know when they have enough, and it is far less kind to those who ruled by greed." Kofi fell silent. For a moment, he thought about wealth. He imagined his basket overflowing with fish. He imagined a bigger boat, a fine house, and all the things he had never been able to afford. But then he thought of his wife, Abena. How patient she has been. How they had gone to bed hungry on so many nights. Then he realized that he did not want the riches. He simply wanted to live comfortably and never have to return home empty-handed again. "This is my wish," Kofi said. "Let my net always bring enough fish to feed my family. enough for us to live comfortably and never fear hunger again. For a moment, the fish was silent. Then it spoke. That is a wise wish, Kofi. From this day forward, your net will never return empty. It will always provide enough for your needs. But then it added, remember my warning. Take only what you need. Do not allow greed into your heart, else the gift will be taken away. Kofi thanked the fish, and it swam back into the river. For a long moment, he sat alone in his boat, wondering if any of it had really happened. After a while, he paddled his boat and headed home. From that day on, everything changed. Kofi's net never returned empty again. He caught exactly what he needed. Some days, his net was filled with fresh fish. Other days, he found something valuable hidden among his catch. But no matter what happened, there was always enough. The first time Kofi returned with a basket full of fish, Abena could hardly believe her eyes. She stared at the basket and burst into tears. Kofi, look at all these fish. For the first time in years, I don't have to worry about what we will eat tomorrow. Kofi smiled. You don't have to worry anymore. Better days have finally come. As the weeks passed, word spread throughout Nedu. The fisherman who had once been known for his bad luck was suddenly returning home with impressive catches every single day. The same people who had once laughed at him now spoke about him with admiration. Women buying fish stopped to ask how he managed to catch so much. Not long after, nobody called him unlucky anymore. Instead, they gave him a new name, Kofi the Lucky Fisherman. Children would run along the shore whenever they spotted his boat approaching in the distance. Kofi is coming, they would shout excitedly. The children would gather around his basket as they admired the fresh fish. And because he had not forgotten the days when he had little, he would often hand out a fish or two to families who were struggling. With each passing day, his reputation grew, and soon his name was known throughout the village. But while most people were happy for Kofi, his neighbor, Kwame, was not. Kwame lived just a few houses away from Kofi, and he had known him for many years. He owned the biggest boat in Nedu. He had the strongest nets and the finest fishing equipment money could buy. For years, he had been the most respected fisherman in the village. Whenever he walked through the marketplace, people greeted him with admiration. Young fishermen listened to his advice, and many hoped to become as successful as he was one day. But with Kofi's sudden success, everything began to change. Everywhere he went, people talked about Kofi instead. The praise that once belonged to him now belonged to someone else. At first, he tried not to care, but as the days passed, he found it harder and harder to ignore. A feeling of jealousy began to grow inside him, and with each passing day, that jealousy even grew stronger. One afternoon, Kwame returned from fishing and saw a group of children gathered around Kofi's basket. Their eyes were wide with excitement. Look at all these fish, one boy shouted. Kofi is the luckiest fisherman in the whole village, another said. Kwame looked down at his own catch. He had worked harder than usual that day, yet he had caught less than Kofi. What pained him the most was that none of the children even noticed he was there. That night, he sat outside his house, thinking of what to do. His wife, Amma, came and sat beside him.
You've been unhappy lately, my husband. You hardly eat anymore. Is this about Kofi?
What does he have that I don't? Why is everyone talking about him?
Maybe it's simply his time. He struggled for many years. Perhaps fortune has finally smiled on him.
What do you mean? I work harder than him.
My husband, not every can be explained by hard work alone.
But Kwame was not listening. The seed of jealousy had already taken root in his heart. The next night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Kwame quietly made his way to the shore. He hid among the rocks and watched as Kofi prepared his boat. I'm going to find out what your secret is, he whispered to himself. A few moments later, Kofi paddled out onto the water, and Kwame secretly followed from a distance. He watched as he fishes for hours. He expected to see some kind of magic, but he saw nothing unusual. Kofi would simply cast his net into the water and pulled it back up again. Yet every single time, the net was full. That made Kwame even more jealous, and he stopped being grateful for what he had. And as the elders often say, the moment a person stops counting their own blessings and start counting another person's, trouble is never far behind. One evening, Kwame decided to speak with Kofi. He found him near the drying racks where the fishermen hung their nets and fish. Tell me the truth, Kofi, he said. Everyone in the village knows something strange is happening. A man doesn't go from catching nothing to catching more fish than everyone else overnight. What's your secret? He said. At first, Kofi hesitated. He was not a man who liked telling lies. And besides, Kwame is his neighbor, so he told him everything. He told him about the silver fish and the wish it had granted him. He told him about the warning. Take only what you need. The fish warned me never to be greedy. And the day I ask for more than enough, the gift will be taken away. At first, Kwame did not believe him. But the more he thought about it, the more curious he became. That very night, after everyone had gone to sleep, he took his boat out to the sea. He rowed farther than he had ever gone before, farther than the most fishermen dared to travel at night. The water was dark and silent. When he reached the deepest part of the sea, he cast his net into the water. Then he waited. An hour passed, then another. And just as he was beginning to lose hope, he felt a powerful tug on his net. His eyes widened. The net was very heavy, and with all his strength, he pulled it into the boat. And there it was, the silver fish. The scales glowed strangely, just exactly as Kofi had described. Kwame could barely contain his excitement. The fish looked up at him and said, "Fisherman, you already know who I am." "Then grant me a wish," Kwame said immediately. "I can do that, but remember what I told Kofi. Take only what you need." Kwame interrupted. "I don't want a small house or an ordinary boat. I want more wealth than anyone in this village. I want to be richer than kings." For a long moment, the fish said nothing. Then it responded, "Tonight, your net will bring you more wealth than you have ever imagined." Kwame laughed with excitement, and without another word, he threw the fish back into the sea. Then he quickly cast his net again. Moments later, he felt a tug. When he pulled up his net, he could hardly believe his eyes. It was overflowing with gold coins, pearls, gemstones, and treasures beyond his wildest dreams. He stared in amazement, then he burst into laughter. "I've done it! I'm richer than Kofi! I'm richer than everyone!" Again and again, he cast his net into the water, and each time he came back filled with more treasures. Soon his boat was piled high with riches. In his excitement, he failed to notice something important. The treasure was becoming too heavy, and his boat was beginning to sink. Little by little, water spilled over the sides. The boat sat lower and lower into the sea. Still, he paid no attention. He was too busy counting his treasure. Then suddenly, the boat tilted sharply to one side, and water rushed in. Kwame stumbled, and before he could react, the boat rolled onto its side, and within moments, the treasure disappeared beneath the waves. Kwame kicked and splashed in the dark water until he finally managed to grab hold of a broken piece of wood. Then he drifted for the rest of the night. By dawn, some fishermen found him floating. He was alive, but everything else was gone. When Kofi heard what had happened, he rushed to the shore. He found him shivering from the cold, clinging to a broken piece of wood. Without hesitation, he reached out and helped pull him from the water. Kwame buried his head in shame. He could not look at Kofi. He realized he had spent so much time envying his neighbor that he had nearly lost everything. He had let greed and jealousy cloud his judgment, and now he could see just how foolish that had been. For the first time in many years, he stopped thinking about what other people had. He started noticing what he already had instead. Meanwhile, Kofi kept fishing the same way he always had. He took only what he needed and shared the rest with those who had less. And because of that, his net never let him down. Years passed, and so does the tale of Kofi the Lucky Fisherman. The story teaches an important lesson, that true wealth is not having more than everyone else. True wealth is knowing when you already have enough. If you enjoyed this story, let me know what you learned from it in the comment section. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next tale.